Hello everybody, and thank you for joining us for our webinar for the Creative Writing Masters course today. So my name is Lucy Welch. I'm a Student Inquiries Advisor. So you may recognise my name if we've spoken over the phone or via email before. So just to give you a bit more information about the format of this webinar, we'll be going through the presentation and then you'll be able to ask your questions at the end. And to ask your questions, you can just type the question into the Q&A section on the right hand side of your screen, and if you think that someone else's question is particularly relevant to you or you'd like it to be answered more imminently, then you can actually upvote their question and it will jump to the top of the queue. So with that said, we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar within a few days' time, and I'll just pass over to Dr. Bell and he can start with the presentation.
Hello, Liam Bell here. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to click through the slides. Some of the, the majority of the course specific information is actually towards the end of the presentation. So I'll go through some more general information first and then go through things about the course in particular as we get towards the later slides. As has just been said, if you have questions, please do click through and leave them for me. I'm very happy to answer any and all of them. And I'll click through. And like I say, I'm just going to start with some general information. First of all, in terms of location, we're in Stirling. I'm sure you realise that since you've clicked through to the seminar, but just to give you a bit of context about where Stirling is and why that might be interesting and useful for you in terms of a creative writing masters. Stirling is, as you can see, slap bang in the centre of Scotland, and we're very lucky in that we've got a lot of countryside around us, a lot of beautiful buildings and history around us, and we've also got very good links, transport links up into the Highlands of Scotland, but also Glasgow to the west and Edinburgh to the east. And there's lots of literary events happening in Glasgow and Edinburgh, as well as in Stirling itself. We've got two literary festivals, the first of which is Bloody Scotland, which actually happens, it's a crime writing festival, hence the name, and that happens in September, so it basically happens in the month that the course starts, which is always a nice introduction for students when they arrive. And like I say, lots and lots of history, the castle to go and explore, the Wallace Monument to go and explore, lots of fertile subjects for historical fiction writers, apart from anything else. So that's where we are. In terms of the university itself, some figures just there on the screen for you. I'll pick out a couple of interesting ones for you. We have just over 14,000 students in total. I think the interesting thing on that is that Stirling Council, the council area of Stirling, has just under 100,000 folk in it. So kind of 1 in 10 people that you see will be a student. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but there you are. That's the thing. So we have a very strong student, what's the word, kind of presence in the town. It's a vital part of the city, and you would be joining that part of the city. You would be a postgraduate student, so you'd be one of those 3,800 plus that's listed there. We have plenty of staff, plenty of nationalities, and 20% of our students are from overseas as well. Yes, so just clicking through to the next slide. Again, some statistics there for you in terms of how we've been rated in the past. And this is the International Student Barometer. And again, I'll pick out a couple of them which I think are particularly pertinent for creative writing. And the first one that's particularly pertinent, I think, is first in Scotland and the UK for campus environment. That won't be a surprise for anybody who's visited the campus. We have got a beautiful campus here. As I look out the window, I've got a courtyard outside my window with beautiful sunshine and a beautiful tree, although I don't actually know what type of tree it is. I should. We've got a lock on campus. We've got a castle, small castle on campus. We've got hills around us. We've got the Wallace Monument, which you can see from the campus as well. Ducks, geese, swans, beautiful campus. Which means that if you have had a day of classes, you can go for a walk around the loch, you can go for a walk up into the woods, you can clear your head, and I think that's particularly useful for creative writers, to go and clear your head, stretch your legs, and gain some inspiration. Obviously, first in Scotland for good teachers, quality lecturers, and performance feedback is also important. Modesty forbids me from talking too much about that, but we will get onto it a bit later on in terms of the folk that will be teaching you on the course. And for those of you who are a little bit more inclined towards the sports, we're also first in Scotland for sports facilities. Again, lots of opportunities to be outdoors and live a kind of active lifestyle, which again, I think is useful for writers. A couple of photographs there of the campus itself. The top two have the student halls in them as well, so you can see the types of buildings that those are. Bottom right is the loch with the Ochil Hills. Actually, might not be the Ochil Hills, that's Airtree Hill in the background there. And a lone duck on the loch. So yeah, plenty of beautiful sites and wildlife around the campus for you. And Stirling itself, we're just outside, the campus is just outside the city, about a mile outside. Frequent buses back and forth, or a walk. Stirling itself is actually, it's where I live, where many of the staff live. It's a very safe town, city, I should say. A very friendly city. Quite affordable, certainly when compared to Glasgow and Edinburgh either side. Quite a nice kind of small town feel, as well as it being a city. And like I say, there are a lot of students here, so we're well set up for students. There are lots of things for students to do, and lots of provision for them. All the things that you would expect in terms of the nightlife as well, pubs, cafes, shops. So yeah, it's a city that's easy to walk around. So it's got a nice small town feel and a lot of history to it as well. Easy to, for instance, walk up to the castle and have a look around there. In terms of living costs, this has been put together for you by student support. A rough guide to the types of costs that you might have if you came to us for the year. Accommodation, food, clothes, etc. You are coming to study creative writing, so maybe the books and stationery budget could go up a little bit, who knows. But the important one to pick out there, I think, probably is the local bus travel. To and from campus, £7 a week. Gets you to and from campus on a pass, and that just means that you can come back and forth very quickly and easily. Very, very regular buses backwards and forwards between town and campus, so you don't need to kind of worry about that. And like I say, regular trains into Glasgow and Edinburgh as well from the city centre. In terms of facilities, we've got our library, which is those two photos there. Lovely redeveloped library. Lots and lots of fiction in there for you to explore. Lots and lots of poetry in there for you to explore. It's open 12 hours a day. There's lots of group and private study rooms in there that you can go to. So chances for you to find your own kind of space. We're actually based in the Pathfoot building, which is a separate building to the library. So the Pathfoot building will sometimes have study space open as well. So there are different options for you to locate yourself around campus as well, in terms of study space. And a note about Canvas as well. Canvas is our virtual learning environment. So you can use that to access the materials. We'd put up all the course notes up there. we do have interaction with students up there as well. The majority of our teaching is still done face-to-face, but we would certainly provide all the course information up there so that if you ever need notes or course documentation, then you can get it from there, no problem at all. We don't have any lectures, so lecture slides don't go up there, but certainly notes and tutorial materials will go up there. But like I say, we don't actually have any lectures on the course because we're fully workshop and seminar based. Which leads me into the course itself. This is the MLitt Creative Writing. This is the basic outline, semester 1 being the autumn, so beginning in September, and semester 2 being the spring, so beginning in January. So semester 1 in the autumn, we start with 2 writing workshop modules. Those are traditional workshop modules, which many of you might have taken something similar before. Basically, we get you all, as writers, round the table, reading each other's work and commenting on it, providing feedback, constructive feedback, and the tutor also providing feedback with the idea that whatever you're working on, whatever your work in progress is, we will seek to support you and develop it. We're not interested in giving you prescriptive things to follow in that workshop, templates to follow. It's more about encouraging you to find your own voice, essentially. So those writing workshops work across 2 modules throughout the 11-week semester, which means that it's basically 2 6-week blocks, and those run every Thursday evening. This current year we've had them running from 4 till 6. They have in the past run from 3:30 till 5:30, but you get the idea, early kind of evening, whenever we choose to timetable them and whenever we can get a room for them. So those will run on the Thursday, and then on the Tuesday, we have a choice of 2 taught modules. Those are either art of fiction or writing poetry. I'm sure I don't need to explain the distinction between those two too much. Art of fiction is looking at fiction writers, a series of books, picking them apart, looking at how they're structured, how they're put together, how authors are dealing with things like characterization, point of view, voice, but also things like writing setting and genre. So we'll pull that apart and look for things that might be useful for you as fiction writers. So those of you who are writing prose, that would probably be the option module for you. And then the other option module is writing poetry, which is Kathleen Jamie's module. I should say art of fiction, you'll mostly be getting me. Writing poetry is Kathleen's module, and that is looking at contemporary poets. Again, looking at the nuts and bolts of the poetry and how we can take those texts, look at them as exemplars and bring what we've learnt to our own writing. So the idea behind both of those modules is that we start to look at texts, not just as a reader, but as a writer. So with a writer's eye, looking at what writers have done well, but also what they've not, what we can learn from them. Even, you know, with the idea that even the best books, there might be a missed opportunity or something that's not been done quite in the way that you might do it as you sit down to write. So we're looking at text essentially with that critical writer's eye as much as possible in those modules. Okay, into the spring, which is semester 2. Again, you've got a writer's workshop. As with the first semester, those are 2-hour-long workshops based on your own writing, and they run throughout the semester, but fortnightly rather than weekly. Alongside those, you have 2 taught modules, 2 seminar-based modules. The first being the Writing Life, which basically invites you to write in every form other than prose and poetry, or every form other than fiction and poetry, I should say, is how I like to characterize that module. We look at writing memoir, writing creative non-fiction. We look at writing for radio. We look at script writing, screenwriting, and try and basically stretch you out of your comfort zone a little bit. Try and get you considering other forms and how to write in them. And as with the writing workshop modules, the assessment for that is creative based. So I should have mentioned that when I was talking about the writing workshop modules. Those workshop modules are assessed by a piece of creative work. We might sometimes have a reflective essay or something like a book review in there as well, but the main kind of plank of the assessment is your creative work. The art of fiction and the writing poetry in this first semester is essay based. The writing life, like I say, is also creative based. So if you're coming from an English lit background, we're really moving into kind of assessment by creative writing rather than assessment by essay. And the final module to mention is research skills for creative writing, which sounds really dry, but I promise you isn't. I don't know, we should maybe come up with a different name for that module actually, because actually that's where we get visiting speakers in. It's where we start talking about voice work and performance, so performing your work on the stage, for instance. We would tend to have literary agents coming in that part of the course. We would tend to think about collaborative events. So, for instance, we have an annual collaboration with the art collection here at the University of Stirling, where we invite the students to respond to one of the exhibitions on display, and the art collection then produce a pamphlet of that creative work. So like I say, it's not a dry module. It's actually it's the module which invites you to look outwards and begin thinking about how you can disseminate your work. So we'll also be looking at the wider literary community in Scotland and how you can get involved in that through that module. And that module is assessed. All the other modules are assessed, like I say, either by creative work or by essay or by a combination of both, for which you're awarded a mark. The research skills for creative writing is a pass-fail journal. So the idea being that you're not assessed on how you respond to that beyond the fact that you have responded to it, that you have engaged with it, because the idea is just that you engage, like I say, with what's going on around you. Okay, part of that module as well, I should say, is an end-of-term reading. This year we held that at the Robert Arts Centre, which is here on campus. Yeah, everybody, each of the students stood up and read for about five minutes or so, and that is open to the public. Again, with the idea that we start to equip you with some skills to take your writing out into the big bad world. Not big and bad, sorry, just normal world. Just the world. Okay, into semester 3, which is the summer semester. So that's basically just starting now for our cohort that are with us at the moment. At the moment, we've got a cohort of about 20, and they are just embarking on this summer semester and on their dissertation. Some of them are very nervous about it, but I will say to you, as I say to them, actually, this is a wonderful opportunity. And in a lot of ways, as a writer myself, it's something I'd kill for, in so much as you've got a few months just to concentrate on your creative project and nothing else, with a bit of supervision and help from us. So the dissertation is a creative project of around 15,000 words if it's prose. The poetry equivalent basically is decided with your tutor, because it depends on the type of poetry that you're doing. We don't tend to ask you to write 15,000 words of poetry, because that would be rather a lot. And you also produce a 2,000 word critical reflection on your process and some of the texts that have influenced you, that kind of thing. And for the previous examples, I could have gone back to previous years, but instead what I thought I'd do is just give you a couple of examples of things that this year's cohort have done. So these are dissertation projects that are currently being written by some of our creative writing students. The first is a series of vignettes based on my mother's. When I say my mother's, obviously the student mother's. She's not gone and taken my mother's wartime diaries. That would be strange. Her mother's wartime diaries interspersed with memoir focused on her childhood. So this is one of our students who has actually been out in the world of work for a few years and come back to education. And she had found her mother's diaries from the war, and rich in detail, and with lots of information about a person that she essentially didn't know or didn't recognize, because obviously that was before she herself was born. So what she's doing is she's writing, fictionalizing the mother's wartime diaries, but she's also intercutting that with memoir from her own childhood. So that's very much a memoir-based non-fiction project, but does have that little fictional element as well. The second example I've got for you, and sorry, I should just say in terms of the reflection, that gives her tons of stuff to talk about in terms of the boundaries between fact and fiction, what memoir is, and how you use that source material. The second example I've given you there is a sequence of ekphrastic poetry based on the student's time spent in Paris. So before this student came to us, he was living in Paris. All right for some, and he spent a lot of time, as you would, in art galleries, and so he's writing a sequence of poetry that's based on his responses to the art that he saw there, and that promises to be a kind of wonderful resource, a wonderful kind of source for his poetry, and also, like I say, it ties into what we've been doing with the guys this year in terms of the collaboration with the art project. So it very much draws that through from the module itself. And the final one is an example of kind of the main type of dissertation we get, I would say, which is a kind of prose fiction piece, and this is the opening 3 chapters of a novel centered on 2 brothers who find a body in the woods behind their town. And this is a student who has had this idea for the novel and wanted to write it for quite a long time. She's been kind of experimenting with it through the workshops that we've had through the course of the 2 semesters, and she's now decided that she's going to write the opening 3 chapters of it, with the idea, hopefully, that once she's finished the dissertation, once it's been graded and she's had all that back, that she can then kind of polish it up and send it out to literary agents, and that will be her submission to literary agents. I have absolutely no problem with the dissertation being used in that way, as a way of kind of getting together a portfolio that can then be sent out afterwards. Although, like I say, it does need to be after it's all been graded and rubber stamped. Yeah, so that's the dissertation in your semester 3. Benefits of the course. So it's a practice-based course. Like I say, in terms of the workshops, which I just ran through, the workshops themselves are very much based on your own writing. You will be writing, and every 2 or 3 weeks submitting a piece to the workshop, and that basically means that is the central focus of every week, is your own writing and your own practice and your own process. And I think that's important to note for both for your own development, but also in terms of the tutors on the course. That's what we all do as well. All of us are practicing writers. We all spend the time that we're not teaching you writing. And I think that's important to note. I say that, I mean, we obviously have to do quite a lot of admin as well, but the time that we're not spent teaching you or doing admin, we're writing. So I think that's important. You know, what we're building is a community of writers who are all focused on writing, and essentially trying to spend the majority of our time, your time, our time, on writing and the discussion of writing, rather than on too much of the paraphernalia that goes alongside it, although we will obviously touch on all of that. The other thing we're trying to build very much is a sense of community. That's both internal and external, in that internally, the idea is that there's a cohort and a peer group there. You guys should form, hopefully, friendships, but more than, I say more than friendships, alongside friendships, you should form a peer group who are able to support you in your writing. I did my master's at Glasgow in 2000 and maybe I should just cough there, actually, 2000. And the group of writers that I wrote with there, I still meet regularly with 2 or 3 of them and trust them as my kind of first readers. And I think it's really important that's something that you that every writer needs. And I think that's one of the things that we try to provide through the course, because, like I say, I think that's one of the first things that a writer actually needs and wants. So that's internally, but also externally, we'll try to connect you with the wider Scottish literary community. Like I say, we'll have visiting speakers in, like literary agents. We'll have festivals on your doorstep. Bloody Scotland in Stirling, I Write in Glasgow, the Edinburgh Book Festival, I'm sure you've heard of. We will try and provide you with those opportunities, although obviously you guys will have to go and seek out those opportunities as well. The other benefit of the course is, I would say, that it develops your writing toolkit. What I mean by that is we quite often get asked if you can teach creative writing, and it's a contentious one, that, for some reason. Although nobody ever kind of asks if you can teach somebody to play the violin. That's just a given. But writing, for some reason, it always gets people's heckles up. So what I would say is that I think we can teach you a toolkit, basically. We don't want to prescriptively change what you're writing or what you would like to write. What we'd like to do is give you a toolkit to help you best write that idea. That sounded like a lot of kind of jumbled up words, but what I mean is we are trying to provide you with tools that you can then apply to any piece that you're writing, rather than just saying you should write this one piece and here's how you do it, A to B to C to D. So we're trying to provide you with a kind of adaptability and flexibility and develop your voice. And like I say, we're also seeking to try to add some strings to your bow. So if you're a prose writer, get you interested in script writing, writing for radio. If you're a poet, also get you interested in writing fiction, for instance, and also get you interested in performing your work, which is a big part now of being a writer. So hopefully, just trying to kind of broaden your toolkit, broaden your experiences a bit. Part of that then, I would say, is we do have a lot of events and visiting speakers actually here on the campus. Like I say, we have visiting speakers as part of that research skills module. We also have an annual Booker Initiative event. Last year it was Graham McRae Burnett. This year, I think, although don't hold me to this because it's yet to be confirmed, but I think it's going to be Anne Enright, which will be fantastic. That will be in November. And that's a big university-wide event. We also have a Charles Wallace Fellow, who is an Indian writing fellow who comes every spring semester, normally from about February through till May, and writes within the department and gets involved in the master's programme as well. And like I say, we also have a visiting speakers programme, and we would quite often have additional author visits and events as well, as they come through the year. Final point on that slide then is opportunities. I already mentioned a little bit the collaboration that we have with the art collection. Every year here, the art collection has an exhibition, and we invite the creative writing students to respond to that with a piece of prose or poetry, and that gets produced into a little pamphlet, which is always actually a really wonderful publication. We also have, in the last year, developed a partnership with the Publishing Studies programme to produce a creative writing anthology. So that will come out next month for this current cohort, feature contributions from all of the creative writing students, and it's been edited and marketed and produced by the Publishing Studies students on the Publishing Studies programme. And the final kind of opportunity to mention, I have briefly mentioned it before, is we have an end of term reading, which we hold at the McRobert Arts Centre here on campus, open to the public. It can be quite a nerve-wracking experience, but always a useful one to begin thinking about how you disseminate your work, not just in print, but also in terms of performance. This next slide basically harks back to my earlier point about us all being practicing writers. I think I was trying to think back when I put these slides together to what made me decide on where I went for my university schooling, and even actually when I've gone for creative writing workshops beyond university, if what it is that's drawn me to different writing retreats, for instance. And I think it's always this idea that the writer who is tutoring you should be somebody that you can see that they're practicing, and that you can find something in their work. You don't need to necessarily like their work, but you should find something that you can admire and feel that you can learn from in their work. So this is kind of the most recent work from those of us on the course. Left to right, top to bottom. The Bonniest Company is Kathleen Jamie's most recent poetry collection. Sightlines is her very much award-winning and very much fantastic creative non-fiction nature writing. Then we have my two novels, So It Is, which was my first, and The Busker, which was my second. And then on the line underneath, The Brilliant and Forever, which is Kevin's award-winning book, very, very funny book, and the Diary of Archie the Alpaca, which came out of that book as well. And then beside that, we have This Weight of Light, which is Chris Powicki's poetry collection. And beside that is Northwards Now. Chris Powicki is, there are four of us on the course: Kathleen, myself, Kevin, and Chris. And Chris used to be the editor of Northwards Now. He's just recently given it up. And that actually gives us another insight into the kind of literary community, and another kind of teaching tool, in that he's been very much involved on the editing and commissioning side of the writing process, as well as being a writer. And that can be very useful from a teaching point of view, because often when we're sending stuff out, we don't necessarily know the conversations that are happening in editorial boards, whereas Chris very much does. Okay, in terms of the class profile, who you'd expect to find on the course, our overall cohort is usually around 20 students. That's what we had last year. We are, those of you who have applied, you had to submit a writing sample. We are quite discerning in choosing that writing sample, because, like I say, it's so collaborative and so much peer-led. So we want to make sure that everybody is kind of operating at the same level and able to provide insight to each other's work. So yeah, it's usually about 20 students. We might go a bit above that, but if we do, then the important point to note is the second one, which is that workshop groups are kept deliberately small. We would have a kind of top ceiling of about 10 students on the writing workshops, because the idea is, like I say, to form a community within the workshops, and have you knowing each other's work and able to comment on each other's work without feeling like you're strangers. So those groups are, like I say, kept deliberately small, and normally around one table. That's our basic rule of thumb. We have quite a lot of writers continuing from our undergraduate programme. So we do creative writing at undergraduate as part of the English Studies degree. We would tend to have 5 or 6 just continuing straight through from that, which is always nice. We also have folk coming from overseas, from India, from the US, from anywhere. And that, again, is always nice, because they're bringing a different cultural context from the writers who've continued through from undergraduate. And we also have a lot of folk who are returning to education after work. I think creative writing is well positioned for that as a course that folk would like to come back to, after going out and working for a decade in industry, and then coming back to something that they would see as a vocation or a passion. We've had a lot of teachers coming onto the course. We've had a lot of people who've been working just in other fields and have decided to come back, and that's always, again, lovely, because it gives a different life experience in the classroom. The final point there is that we do have a variety of publishing experience as well within the group. Usually, we have had folk coming on the course who have published. We have had folk coming on who have published novels, but the majority of folk have not, or have published, kind of short stories in local magazines, that type of thing. We don't mind, essentially, whether you have or you haven't, as long as you have a kind of aspiration to learn and develop, as we all do. And like I say, that the writing sample is how we judge that. We don't judge the writing sample on whether or not it's been published. It's just its potential. And similarly, we have some folk who join with aspirations to write something quite long, a novel or a poetry collection, and that's what they pursue all the way through the workshops and into the dissertation, which is nice. And we have some folk who just come with a different motivation, where it's maybe about something like writing for well-being, or even developing their teaching practice, or something like that. And that's, again, absolutely fine. Okay, previous students. I think the intention for this webinar in giving me this slide was that I provide like testimonials of previous students, but actually I thought I'd take the opportunity to highlight some of our students who've gone on to publish and do very well. The first book that you can see there is Karen Lloyd's The Blackbird Diaries. She's actually got 2 books to her name now. I think she graduated from our course in 2015 from memory, and she has since had 2 books. The Gathering Tide was actually written, part of it was written as part of her dissertation, and The Blackbird Diaries has followed. And they are nature-based writing, very much in the mould of Kathleen's work, which I think is why she came here. And she's now studying for a PhD at the University of Lancaster as well. So she's very much following the publishing route and also the academic route. We also have Ross Sayers, who graduated in 2016, again from memory. He's the author of Mary's the Name, which was shortlisted for the Saltire First Book Award. It's a cracking book set on Skye, well worth a look. And he's currently working on his second. And the dapper gentleman on the right is Danny Murphy, who is actually a former teacher and lecturer in education who came back to study on the course because he'd always been interested in writing. And he won the Costa Short Story Prize in 2015, which is a pretty prestigious short story prize. And we actually also had somebody on the shortlist of 3 for that last year as well, Francis Ainsley. So it's, for whatever reason, it's a short story prize our graduates have always done particularly well in. Yes. And I guess that leads me on to career paths. I guess the majority of you, the career path that you're most interested in is published author. And why not? It's the ultimate goal for many of you, I'm sure. I think it's important. I'm not going to pour like massive amounts of cold water on this or anything, but I think it's important just to be realistic about that. I think what we would like to do, going back to the toolkit, is provide you with the toolkit to become that published author. But I think there needs to be a recognition that it's a very long and obviously hugely competitive pathway. Many of the folk that I did my master's with have gone on to be published, but many of them, it was after a gap of 3 or 4 years. Having said that, there are folk like Ross and Karen from the previous slide who essentially wrote something for their masters and then were fortunate enough to have it picked up either by a literary agent or directly by a publisher. That can happen. I'm just like I say, not to pour cold water, but just be aware that what we're trying to do is develop towards that rather than necessarily kind of wave a magic wand, because writing is difficult and the marketplace is difficult. So we're trying to equip you for that rather than kind of giving you a silver bullet, if you see what I mean. We also have had a lot of folk going on into writing for other means, so writing for well-being or for therapy. We also have currently on the cohort somebody who works in marketing and has found creative writing very useful for that side of his job as well. Yes, and so there's plenty of other ways in which you could use the writing. We do find as well that teaching is a big part of that, either to augment existing teaching practice or as a creative writing tutor. A lot of folk go on and run their own creative writing workshops, which is great. And I think it's important to note, I mean, fairly obviously, as well as writing, I also teach. I think a lot of writers who fulfill that first point of published author also have one of these other jobs, also have one of these other forms of income, because writing doesn't necessarily pay well and doesn't necessarily pay consistently. That feels very downbeat, sorry. There's also jobs in publishing. Like I say, there is a publishing studies course here at Stirling, and their visiting speakers sessions are open to you as creative writing students as well. Many of our students have gone on to become freelance editors, copy editors, for instance. And we also do have routes into academia. So the Masters is a step before the PhD. We have 2 PhDs currently who've come through the Masters programme. We also have Karen, who I mentioned in a previous slide, who's gone on to do a PhD elsewhere. It's hugely competitive, again, PhD funding. But if you have a kind of strong idea for that, we're delighted to support you in applying for funding. The main source of that is the acronym I've mentioned there, the AHRC DTP, which won't mean anything to you, but stands for Arts and Humanities Research Council Doctoral Training Partnership. And that's our main pot of funding that we go to for that. But plenty of time to talk about that as and when. Okay, that is my whistle-stop tour. Well, it felt whistle-stop for me. It might not have for you. If any of you have any questions, I am absolutely delighted to answer them for you. Worth mentioning, I think the way that you ask a question is by clicking on the little Q&A tab, and then at the bottom it says ask a question ... and you can type your question in there. Don't be shy. Oh, I got excited there that I got a question. It's just student support. Somebody throw me a softball question, please. Aha, thank you. Okay, so the question is, you have a question about part-time study? Yes. So the question is, how many students study the course part-time? Yeah, good question. So we have full-time is 1 full year, those 3 semesters. Part-time is across 2 years, and so 6 semesters. I tend to find, in terms of the part-timers, that actually we would have probably only around 2 or 3 a year. To be honest, we've had 2 this current cohort and 3 the year before. I think creative writing folk tend to want that kind of immersive experience of the full year, but I think the benefit of the part-time is that you get 2 different cohorts, so you get lots of exposure to lots of different writers as your peer group, and also there are invariably inevitably different things going on in the 2 years, so you get exposure to a lot more kind of events. And I think also the part-time students, the 2 or 3, they obviously fold in with the part-time students from the year before, and they end up forming a little kind of cohort of their own as well, which is always nice. So yeah, it's kind of I would say 2 to 3 normally in any 1 year. When is the thank you for the question. And Kiki, when is the latest we can accept our offer? When are decisions made on scholarships? You can accept your offer. I do remember, Kiki, that we have made you an offer, so you can accept your offer right the way through until September, essentially, until the start of the course. It obviously helps us if you accept sooner, but you can accept right up until the start of the course. In terms of scholarships, I think I presume it's an ongoing process. Okay, so there's no definitive. Sorry, I was just checking with one of my colleagues. There's no kind of definitive end date to that. You'll just hear as the decision is made, I'm afraid. So hopefully soon. There certainly shouldn't be a massive delay on it. The deadline for applications. Again, to be honest, we can accept applications right up until the start, right up until September. We are always happy to, but we do like getting them earlier in the summer, just because it helps with planning, but it doesn't affect your decision in any way if you apply later. So basically any time through the summer, and we'll try to respond to applications fairly quickly. We tend to reply within a kind of 3 weeks, I would say, is about our rates of reply. So you don't have to wait for a massively long time. Sorry, I know that wasn't really your question, but I just thought I'd vamp a wee bit at the end. And Rachel, what's the acceptance rate? That's a statistical question. Maths is not my strong point. I couldn't tell you exactly what it is. I would say, and this is going to be purely back of an envelope anecdotal, but I would say we probably accept about 50% of applicants. We read every single application that comes into us, the writing sample of it. The writing sample is read by 3 of us, and we make a consensus decision. So basically, if all 3 of us like it, great, you're in. If 2 of us like it, 1 of us isn't sure, then great, you're in. If there's anything else, then obviously if none of us feel that it's quite at the level for the masters, then we send a decline. But if there's any kind of fence sitting, then we do genuinely sit down and discuss. And we take it very seriously. We kind of wring our hands over quite a few applications, because we want to make sure that you'd be a good addition to the course, but also that we can give you what you're looking for. So we find quite often that we would have applications for instance, for explicitly genre fiction. I think we can help with that. We can help with particularly literary genre fiction, but I think if it's genre fiction that follows a template, then I think there are better places to do that, because it's not our teaching strength. So we do genuinely have those types of discussions. It's not just, is this writing any good? It's also about fit with us. And then, yeah, like I say, I think we probably end up, although I haven't done any kind of statistical analysis on this, but I think we probably end up with about 50% acceptance rate. I'm just going to answer Rachel's question first, and then I'll come on to Gilly's. So does the university assist with job placement, finding a job after completion of the course? We try to. Yeah, we do have. Sorry, again, I was checking with one of my colleagues. We do have a careers service who are always very happy to talk to you. So yes, in that way. But I guess you're meaning more kind of targeted than that in the literary industry. I think we try to, in that module that I was talking about, the research skills module, we try to connect you to a certain extent with the literary community, and that hopefully will assist with finding a job after completion of the course. And we're always obviously happy to point you towards opportunities and indeed to provide references and that type of support as well. I would say kind of employability, if I can use that word, is embedded through the course, particularly in that spring semester where we're starting to look outwards and think about what you're going to do next and how you're going to take your writing on. So yes, but I think there is also legwork that you guys need to do with that as well. Jilly's question, do I need to send anything through when I get my results from my current undergraduate degree in order to meet my conditions, or will it go through directly since it's from Stirling? I think it'll go, it should go through automatically, and then there'll be instructions on the portal. So yes, it shouldn't be a problem. You shouldn't have to do anything, but if you do find that it jars or stalls, Jilly, then to be honest, just get in touch with admissions, or you could even get in touch with me and I'll chase it up for you as well. But because you're already on site, it shouldn't cause a problem at all. How many students have you already accepted for the course starting this September? We have, I have it written down on a sheet of paper. We have 11 who are signed up, and we have 10 offers out, including, I would imagine, some of you from what I'm hearing. So we have 11 folk who are already signed up to come, and we have 10 who we're waiting to hear back on, having offered them a place. Again, from experience, I would say about half of those would come. So that would leave us sitting, you can tell I'm great at maths, that would leave us sitting around 16. And like I say, we tend to get 20, although I think we'll maybe be up around 25 this time round. So we're already kind of filling up, but there is no filling up. Yes, thank you. Quite right. Tell me to stop my answer. I've already answered the question. Yes, to Samuel's question, it is possible to write the dissertation in genre fiction. Like I say, I wouldn't say it's necessarily our speciality, though. So what we will, I think we would all consider ourselves to be kind of experienced literary editors as well as writers. So we will help you to develop it. But if you are interested in one specific type of genre fiction, then there might be other avenues that you could explore as well, because I do think there are types of genre fiction which we don't cater for as much, because we tend towards general fiction, literary fiction, however you want to categorize that, and creative nonfiction and poetry. Any other questions? Thank you for all the questions, by the way. Oh. Could I brief about visiting scholarships? Oof. I would love to, but I wouldn't want to steer you wrong. Particularly if it's a British Council question. Because I don't actually have any experience of those British Council visiting scholarships, I wouldn't want to steer you wrong. If you have specific questions about that, I would advise getting in contact with the British Council, or if it's something that you need input on. Oh, there you go. That's a much better answer than mine. Look at that. So yeah, there you go. That's a much better answer. But yeah, I would go through student support to find that information, because I genuinely wouldn't want to steer you wrong. I think that would yeah, it would be a bad idea. Thank you. Okay, any final questions? The workload per week. It's a difficult one, actually. A lot of it obviously is based on your own writing. So we would essentially be encouraging you to write every day, particularly because you're handing in for workshops every 2 or 3 weeks. So actually, those submissions come round relatively regularly. And you'd normally hand in around 3,000 words for a workshop. So actually, you are creating quite a lot of work. But in terms of the face-to-face, you'd have about 4 hours of contact hours a week, in terms of workshops and seminars. And there's the reading for that, and like I say, mostly the writing for that. So what would that equate to? I would, again, I can only kind of go from anecdotal experience to a large extent, because I think it'll be slightly different for every student. But I would imagine that you would be hopefully writing every single day through the week, and then coming in on the Tuesdays and the Thursdays for your classes, and you should certainly be reading all the way through the week as well. So yeah, I think it can be a heavy workload, but it's largely self-propelled. Any other final questions? Thank you, Samuel. Okay, I will then draw to a close, if that suits everyone. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Rachel, and for your questions. Much appreciated. And I will hope to see some, if not all of you, in September. Thank you very much.